Part C. In this part of the test, you'll hear 2 different extracts. In each extract, you'll hear health professionals talking about aspects of their work. For questions 31 to 42, choose the answer A, B, or C, which fits best according to what you hear. Complete your answers as you listen. Now look at Extract 1. Extract 1, questions 31 to 36. You now have 90 seconds to read questions 31 to 36.
New research from the Perkins Institute at the University of Sydney claims to have found the diet that boosts FGF21 levels. One of the lead scientists on the study was Samantha Solon-Biot of the Perkins. Welcome to the Health Report.
Thank you for having me.
So what is this stuff, FGF21? I mean, it's almost eye-crossingly complicated from the look of it.
Yeah, it seems complicated, but it's actually not. And recently, there's actually been an immense amount of interest in fibroblast growth factor 21, or FGF21. And this hormone has actually recently been called this fountain of youth hormone, which we know can be influenced by diet. And the reason why FGF21 is so interesting is because high levels of this miracle hormone, as it's called, has actually been shown to play a huge role in influencing appetite, improving metabolic health and immunity, and even extending lifespan in mice.
Now, something that sounds so good to be true is usually too good to be true.
At this point, there are no adverse effects shown with increased levels of FGF21. In fact, a lot of studies are now being done to investigate FGF21 as a therapeutic target for the treatment of diabetes and cardiovascular disease.
Let's just double back, Sam. A year or so ago, we had Steve Simpson, who's the director of the Perkins Institute, talking about this 25 diet study where they studied 25 diets in mice to see if you could replicate the life-prolonging effects of a low-calorie diet, where extremely low-calorie diets in some animal species, in fact all animal species, it seems, apart from humans because it's not been proven yet, increases life expectancy or lifespan. Is the FGF21 really the heart of this matter?
We think it actually could be. Certainly in this study, we've shown that a diet low in protein and high in carbohydrate is the most effective way to increase levels of this miracle hormone. And that this diet was also associated with several markers of improved metabolic health in mice.
So tell us a little bit about this study.
Well, what we actually did was performed a really large mouse study, as you said, where we took 858 mice and offered them a range of different diets to see how macronutrients, such as proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, as well as total energy, could interact and influence levels of FGF21.
And you found?
And we found exactly that we could use diet to increase the levels of this FGF21 hormone, and that a low-protein, high-carbohydrate diet was the most effective way for increasing this miracle hormone.
And what effect did that miracle hormone, I hate using that word, that phrase, but what effect then did the hormone have on these mice, or were you able to separate the two?
We were actually able to show that the exact diet that increased FGF21 also improved things like insulin sensitivity, glucose tolerance, blood pressure, and blood lipids, even though the animals were a little bit fatter.
And how do you know that was anything whatsoever to do with the FGF21, your so-called miracle hormone, and rather than it just being an accident that it was raised too?
What we did was plotted FGF21 using the geometric framework, which is a nutritional modeling platform that helps us tease apart the role of nutrients and calories. And if you line up all the surfaces, the response surfaces in this framework with FGF21 and all the metabolic outcomes, you can clearly see that there's a specific area in the nutrient space that coincides with increased levels of FGF21 and several metabolic benefits.
And what kind of carbohydrate, and what happened with fats?
In this study, fat did not appear to have an effect on FGF21 levels. It seemed to be low protein was the primary driver, and that the highest combination was with a low protein, high carbohydrate diet.
So what does FGF21 do to the body?
And that's a really good question. And that's really the next step of our study. We want to understand how FGF21 signaling works in response to diet to mediate all these beneficial outcomes.
Do we know that were there any medications affected?
At this point, no.
It seems that it goes up with starvation, it goes up with overfeeding. There's lots of things that influence it. Did the appetite of these mice change? Do they eat more or less when the FGF21 goes up?
Oh, that's a really good question. See, this is one of the things that we were able to reconcile in our studies. As you mentioned, a whole range of literature in previous studies have shown that FGF21 is elevated in many paradoxical conditions such as starvation and obesity, high intake of food and low intake of food, as well as in insulin resistance and in insulin sensitivity. So what is going on here? Using the geometric framework, we were actually able to tease apart these findings, showing that reduced protein intake is the primary driver of FGF21.
Okay, so what happens in mice does not necessarily happen in humans. How do you know it makes any difference at all in humans?
Oh, I'm glad you said that. We've actually published work just this year showing that FGF21 levels in humans is also increased by a low-protein, high-carbohydrate diet. And of course, this is really exciting because it tells us that the work that we do in mice can be directly translatable to humans.
So is there any evidence at all that FGF21 has the same beneficial metabolic effects in humans as it has in mice?
Yes, there is definitely evidence to suggest that high FGF21 levels is directly related and associated with several benefits of metabolic health in humans as well.
So we should put it in the drinking water then, do we?
Yeah, probably. That seems to be the case, yes.
How would it work? I mean, obviously a hormone like this is probably destroyed in the stomach. This is not something that you would give directly to people, I assume, in the therapeutic context?
At the moment, it's difficult to do chronic administration to humans. So what's happening in terms of drug development is trying to develop mimetics of FGF21 and analogs. So not exactly administering this hormone per se, because it would require chronic injections or chronic administration.
So almost nothing that's touted as a breakthrough or a miracle by scientists turns out to be so. What are your modest expectations of FGF21 in humans?
Well, in humans, we actually think that FGF21 is extremely promising. We think that, at least in humans, we've shown that FGF21...
So a treatment for type 2 diabetes?
Absolutely.
That sort of thing?
Yes. We've shown that humans seem to respond in the same way as mice. So this could mean that we could tailor our diets and our nutritional guidelines to generate a range of benefits from FGF21.
Is it too blunderbuss? You're describing something that sounds blunderbuss rather than targeted. You're just spraying an effect rather than targeting an effect. If you can do anything with it, it's going to be a very wide set of actions which you're going to find hard to control, isn't it?
At the moment, everyone is very interested at FGF21, but no one really knows its mechanism of action. And it seems to be a race at the moment. How does it work? What turns it on? What switches it off? And what can we do to find out more about it? So at this point, I think it's a really hot topic and everyone's racing to find out the answer.
And you hope you'll be first.
Hopefully.
Sam, thanks for joining us on the Health Report.
Thank you so much.
Samantha Solon-Beat is a researcher at the Perkins Institute at the University of Sydney, and on our website we'll have a link to our previous interview on the diet and longevity study.
Now look at Extract 2. Extract 2, questions 37 to 42. You now have 90 seconds to read questions 37 to 42.
Today, I'm going to talk about the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages and their impact on health. I'll tell you about how it leads to increased energy intake and therefore increased weight gain. This weight gain will lead to obesity, and then from that we get all kinds of diseases, including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and some cancers as well. It's quite a big problem in Australia. In fact, Australia is in the top 10 countries per capita for the consumption of soft drink. And it's particularly bad with young Australians. Australian men aged between 12 and 24 are in fact the highest consumers. Another pattern is that it's particularly bad in lower socio-economic groups. Now, as this is such a big problem, there's a few groups, and one group in particular who is trying to fight against the overconsumption of sugar in these sweetened beverages, and this place is called Rethink Sugary Drink. It's a partnership between 12 health and community organisations, and it includes the Australian Cancer Council, Diabetes Australia, the Heart Foundation, Nutrition Australia, the YMCA, and the Australian Dental Association. What they're hoping to do is to get Australians to rethink their sugary drink consumption, and they're going to do that by highlighting the amount of sugar in beverages such as soft drink, energy drinks, sports drinks, and fruit juice. If you go to their website, which is rethinksugarydrink, or one word, .org.au, you can find some facts about sugar intake in Australia. You can also access various research and media. This includes posters that you can put up. And you can calculate how much sugar there is in certain drinks. And you can also calculate how much exercise you'd need to do to burn off the sugar you've consumed. So what's actually causing people to consume so much sugar-sweetened beverages? Well, there's quite a few things. So there's role models. And this is quite big for children in particular, role models. Now, for adults, there's some specific things, and that could be their social setting. So we need to remember that there's a lot of sugar in alcohol as well. And of course, social settings with alcohol, people are going to consume that. We also find that if you're having fast food, then lots of people will have sugar-sweetened drinks as well, because often they're sold along with the fast food. For children, we're looking at the availability for children. So, for example, how available it is at home, if it's in the fridge, if it's available. And we're also looking at schools as well. Now, a lot of schools have vending machines with soft drinks in them, for example. Another factor is advertising and marketing. Now, a lot of the marketing could be targeted for children in particular. So, there could be entertainment or sporting events. There might be lots of advertising for sugar beverages, children's sports events. One example is Moomba in 2015. This is lots of children attend this, and there's lots of soft drink advertising at Moomba. If we look at Coca-Cola as one example, so Coca-Cola actually spent $29.6 million in marketing in 2009. So marketing's a really big deal. We also find that price is a big issue as well. So soft drinks and juice, they have high price elasticity of demand. What we mean by this is how much of it's bought will have a big difference on price. Now, it's estimated that if we had to tax 20% on soft drink, then the drop in demand from that tax would result, in weight loss of between 0.7 and 1.2 kilograms average per person per year, just from that tax. So speaking of tax, there's a new tax which was announced in the UK on sugary drinks, and this is going to start in 2018. Now, there's already a tax in some places. There's a tax in Hungary, in Mexico, and in France. We've also got Berkeley in California, America, but they're not going to have their tax until 2018, same time as the UK. So with the UK tax, it's going to depend on the content of sugar. So they're measuring it by the amount of grams of sugar per 100 millilitres. If the beverage has between 5 and 8 grams, then it's going to cost around 30 cents per litre extra with this new tax. Now, the rate's higher if it's over 8 grams, and that's going to be 50 cents per litre. Now, it doesn't apply to fruit juice or milk products, so it's just to soft drinks. Now, there's been approval from a lot of health advocates. However, there have been some arguments that this tax will punish poor people. This tends to be for people who are working for the soft drink companies, to be honest. They think it's exclusionary. So the argument some people are having is rather than a tax, there should be some other methods, because some people think that the tax shouldn't be used to force choices. They think rather than forcing people's choices through price, it's better to increase education and make people have informed choices rather than make the decisions based on price. But we'll see how this tax goes. It seems to be pretty promising for a lot of people involved. So a lot of research has been done on weight gain and consumption of high sugar drinks, and the different studies have shown slightly different effects and results. Now, one reason for this is that there's been different study methodologies. Another is that there's different sample characteristics. We also have different definition, of the variables. So the variables are differently defined. So more research is needed. It needs to be more tightly controlled. But what we do find is that there's at least a probable association between sugar-sweetened drinks and increased weight gain, body mass index, overweight and obesity. What we've also found is that people consume these drinks without less food to compensate. So what we mean by this is that people are having a lot of these extra calories through their drinks, but they're not actually therefore changing their diet to have less calories elsewhere. So a lot of these drinks are just additional calories on top of their existing diet. So this is leading to weight gain. And we also find that the weight gain is actually higher than just the excess calories from the drinks themselves. So what we think is happening is that the weight gain isn't just from the drinks itself. It's actually considered that maybe the sugar-sweetened drinks stimulate hunger or suppress satiety as well. And the reason for this is that these high sugar drinks, they're high in fructose. Now, the thing about fructose is it doesn't lower the hunger hormone ghrelin in the same way as glucose does. Now, glucose is the main carb found in starchy food. So the brain should regulate calorie intake, but with liquid sugar it can't. So what happens is that these calories from these drinks just get added to your regular intake. In one study, people added a can of sugary drink to their existing diet and increased their calorie intake by 17%. Now, this 17% was more than just those extra calories from the drink itself. We find that adding daily sugar-sweetened beverages to a child's diet, that can increase obesity risk by as much as 60%. There was another study in America on this, and they found that sugar-sweetened beverages can account to 20% of the weight gain between 1977 and 2007. So the World Health Organization and World Cancer Research Fund, they consider sugary drink consumption to be a probable risk for weight gain for these reasons. There really are quite a lot of diseases which are linked to the consumption of sugary drinks. Now, one of them is the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, the reason for this is, as we mentioned before, we've got glucose and fructose. Now, with glucose, it can be metabolized by every cell in the body, but fructose, which is what these sugary drinks have, it can only be metabolized by the liver. And then what can happen if you overdrink them is the liver gets overloaded with fructose, and then it turns that into fat. Now, some of this fat gets shipped out in blood triglycerides, but others stay in the liver, and it just continues to build up until you've got this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
That is the end of Part C. You now have 2 minutes to check your answers.
That is the end of the listening test.